Hello, hello. It is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop, and today I have a special guest. One thing I want to tell you about our special guest is there's only two types of people in the world who own katanas: total nerds and savage badasses. And I think that this platinum-selling, Grammy-winning mixer, Jeff Ellis, is probably in the latter. He is also a advanced-level jiu-jitsu practitioner, so I'm definitely going to put you in the badass category. But I think a nerd in the right ways and not a nerd in the wrong ways, which is something we're going to talk about here a lot. He's just come out with a new course called Mixerbrain. You can check it out over at SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. That's a link. They'll get you right to it. I think it's great. I have not finished it yet. It is super long. There's like 24 hours of footage in there. But what I've checked out so far is great. Just like the first 5 chapters I went through are awesome. And I want to tell you why I love Jeff. But before I get into that, let's just say hi to Jeff. Jeff Ellis, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you? I want a testimonial of, I'm going to say Justin Colletti in quotes. Mixerbrain is super long. And then that's the whole quote. Can I use that?
Yes. Mixerbrain.
The reviews are in super long.
Or you could just say made by a savage badass. But here's the other thing. Your course does not feel super long because I feel like, unlike my courses where the modules are like 30 or 40 minutes, you have a lot of these kind of tight modules in there. There's a really fun vibe and atmosphere in the whole course. And there's so much forward momentum in it. And I don't know, it's just enjoyable, fun, irreverent style. And we'll talk about some of your biggest ideas from the course. We'll give away some of your magic for free to the people. But Jeff, Mixerbrain, what is the course about? If you had to sum it up in like a word or two, like what's the message that you're trying to spread to the world?
Okay. First of all, I noticed Murphy is just sitting right here perfectly in frame.
Hey,
That's
Pooch.
so good.
Yep.
Okay, so Mixerbrain is not a good thing. Mixerbrain is a really bad thing. And what it is this terrible brain disease that spreads around the music industry like wildfire. It's like, and when you get into making music, just by that action alone, you get infected with Mixerbrain. And Mixerbrain can be defined as basically any state of mind other than just being a little kid in their basement listening to music on headphones, right? So when we're in that state, we listen to music completely differently than when we're actually like making music or engineering music or writing music. The second we start getting away from what I call feeling brain, which is a little kid listening to, when you're growing up listening to music, you weren't thinking about the production. You weren't thinking about if people at home would like the music. Your insecurities weren't creeping into anything. You weren't thinking about what's the coolest plug-in chain. None of that stuff. You're using a completely different part of your brain when you're listening to enjoying music. And that's pretty much the opposite of Mixerbrain. So I basically... over the last several years, I've seen like the quality of stuff that gets sent to me mixed in terms of like the production quality is just like dwindling to a point where it's like almost like you can't even do anything to it anymore. And all of the creative part, like some of the creative parts about it, they're making cool songs, but they're like basically self-destructing it with Mixerbrain and crazy processing that doesn't make any sense. And it's gotten so bad you have no idea. Like people, so I'm one of the few mixers on Earth.
I do have an idea. Well, mastering records that people are mixing, especially the hobbyist level. Yeah,
you do to a certain extent. However, you don't open people's DAW sessions, right? I'm one of the few people on Earth that opens up 200, 250 DAW sessions of producers all over the world, from the top producers in the world to like mid-tier to bedroom warriors. I open up everybody's stuff. And so I see exactly what's going on in these sessions, and it's gotten so bad that it goes well beyond what anybody would even imagine. Like, it's not hyperbole to say that there's this great... There's a module in Mixerbrain called the Great Plugin Pandemic, right? And so that's why I had to make Mixerbrain, because I really want to make a difference in the world of music. And I started to realize the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I attack this problem at the source. Because like by the time things get to me, a lot of the time, so much of the emotion in the record is just already gone and unretrievable. So instead of complaining like I did for years, I decided to do something about it. And I basically kind of like took a step back from mixing for like half a year. And me and Trevor, went just hardcore on making this course because, you know, like I'm working out of East West Studios. Every day I'm not mixing songs, I'm like going broke. So we went super hardcore into it. I had the best time of my life making it. And yeah, so that's Mixerbrain.
It shows. It really seems like a lot of fun. And when I say your course is super long, I always thought my courses were super long because I have like an 8-hour course on compression, an 8-hour course on EQ, 8-hour course on mixing, and I thought they were stupid long. But yours is, I want to say, stupid long in a good way. It is, and it's in this principle-based approach where I think it's every one of these chapters is about a distinct principle that you can bring in to mixing. And you really showed us, I think, already 2 of these principles on your MixCon presentation from last year. Anyone who hasn't checked it out, go check it out now. Look up Jeff Ellis MixCon. I think it was from 2024. And in that, you show us this plug-in pandemic principle, the death spiral.
Yeah, the death spiral, yeah.
Yes. And you show us this lens of putting on Mixerbrain and taking off Mixerbrain, and you walk us through a great audio example to do that. So I don't want to rehash some of that stuff too much because people can check it out here. I want to give people a few new hints of what's in the course, some good free takeaways that they can have, and people want to check it out more fully, you can go over to SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. Right now, there's a 20% off launch special on it. But Jeff, one of the modules that I just started getting to, it comes after the katana module, which is what I just finished and why I put that in the thumbnail here. The next one that's coming up in there that you said to me is one of the most important parts of the course is about, can you give me the idea of the next module?
Yeah, well, okay, so Balance in the Force is the name of the chapter you're referring to. And I think this chapter alone will change everybody's life and completely break their brain in half to realize that so much more so than anything, by a factor of 1 billion, is just the levels that we put stuff at in our mix, right? So in that chapter, I talk about before we do any mixing, okay, before we grab Soothe 2 or some whatever, we have to understand what is the objective of the song that we are mixing, right? This is something that people don't even think this way. We've drifted so far away from, we've drifted so far into Mixerbrain, but like, what is the objective of a song, right? So if the objective of a song is to make you dance, okay, well, we can start there. That's where we can start figuring out what is going to be the balance of this mix, right? So when we go through Billie Jean, for example, like we did at MixCon a couple years ago, the drums of that song were the core emotional element, right? So if you take the song Billie Jean and you just mix it like a modern pop song where the vocal is really up in your face, the loudest thing in the mix, which is typically what we find in a top 40 song, right? But that violates what's the core emotional element of Billie Jean, which is it's the drums, because it's a dance song, right? So all of the emotion in Billie Jean is coming from the drums, right? So one of the exercises we do in Mixerbrain, spoiler alert, is we take Billie Jean and we use AI stem separation, and we bring the drums way down and then we bring the vocal way up, okay? Just to highlight how important balance is. So in doing that, the song is still okay. And Michael Jackson, one of the best singers of all time, by far, we can all agree on that. You'd think having his vocal up in your face would by default be like the big upfront vocal, super important pop song. But you realize all of a sudden when you do that, you don't even dance anymore, right? So that's the difference between being able to dance on, like, when you listen to Billie Jean, you can't not move your body. That's how powerful. That's why I call it balance in the force. This is like the mana of a mixed Jedi, right? In that chapter, we talk about mana and all these wizardry things. It's crazy. But the difference between dance and no dance is where your fader is set at, right? And these are the 100%. Things that people get completely wrong. So no Fairchild in the world, no plugin, no whatever is going to be the difference between dance and no dance to that level, right? So, and you just have to go through the exercise to really understand. It's the same thing when there's a song where the core emotional element of the song is the vocal. Let's say it's a love song. So the objective is to feel love and emotion and romance. If you get the balance wrong there, it's the difference between goosebumps and tears or none of that stuff, right? So by the time you get to the end of that balance in the force chapter, you completely rethink the way that you're approaching these mixes, and you start to think a lot more about balance. And I talk about what I call microdynamics in that chapter, and what I also call macro dynamics. A lot of the things that people mess up while they're putting their 15th plugin on a vocal is they don't even think about how the energy of a song is flowing between sections, right? And we go through various songs where I'm showing how this part gets very quiet, so this one part can get super loud, and how if we reverse that, all the emotion gets away. And I really try to get people back to this foundational understanding that balance. They used to call mixers balance engineers, right? That's what they used to call us. This is so important. And you're never going to see a YouTube tutorial of someone talking about how cool the fader is, but the fader is the thing that gives you tears, and the fader is the thing that can prevent tears from happening. So people really need to lock in on the balance and literally obsess about balance. Like that's why in that chapter I use all these analogies of actually Baby Yoda introduces the chapter balance in the force. Okay, that's how important this is. And by the time you get to the end of the balance in the force chapter, you're like, oh my God, what have I been doing the last 10 years of my mixing life? And yeah.
All I can say, Jeff, is just to really parrot everything that you're saying here. One of the reasons I love having you on, and I've loved so many of the presentations you've done, I think this is the 4th time you've been on the channel, because we've interviewed you twice. We've had you for 2 MixCon presentations. This is actually time number 5 you're here. And one of the reasons I love having you back is that the stuff you're saying is the kind of thing I want everybody to know, that the most important thing in any mix is the mixing part of the mix. The actual balances. I have this
crazy, right?
Yes, I know, right? So the 2 biggest mistakes, I want to ask you some of the biggest mistakes you can hear in final releases, what you think are some of the things people focus on too much. But I'll just give you 2 things right out of the gate for me. One is sometimes people work so hard to make everything clear and well balanced when they're starting to get better at mixing, and they say, oh, I need to be able to hear everything equally. And it's like, no, that's not your job as a mixer. Your job is to enhance the emotional impact of the song. You're supposed to show me and have me focus on the things that are going to give me the most emotional impact in this section of the song at this moment. And that's not everything being equally heard at once all the time. It's you prioritizing. So that's one thing. And the other thing I hear sometimes, which is maybe a worse form of Mixerbrain, is I want to impress my other audio engineers friends' brain, where they just focus on the kick drum and how big can I make the kick drum be on songs where it shouldn't be the biggest thing. There are certain songs where the kick drum should be the biggest thing, but they don't even think about that. They think about how impressive can I make XYZ sound that'll make me sound like a good mixer, instead of saying what's actually most important here. So I want to ask you, what do you think are some of the most common things that you hear in mixes that are problems when people get Mixerbrain? Or 2, what are some of the most common things that people focus on that they shouldn't be focusing on?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and it's what I hear in every DAW session I open, and I see because I go through the sessions, but I mean, I don't think there's been a vocal that I've gotten in the last 3 years that had under like 5 plugins on it. Generally, it's up in the 10. I get records from top 40 artists that had 15 plugins on the vocal, and regularly, I bypass every single one of those plugins, other than like the reverb and delay and like the effects. It's kind of funny. Like it's very funny. Is like I see a lot of like death spirals with too much EQ, compression, Soothe 2, multiband, all that stuff. But I don't see a lot of death spirals with like creative effects. In fact, I almost like don't see enough of that. Yeah. So it's really weird. And I think that's just like mixers and engineers have become way too technical. And if you saw the course, like this first walking lecture I do is talking about, I want you to get obsessed with the canvas, okay? Not the paintbrush. Imagine a painter like Michelangelo was like trying to do the Sistine Chapel, but was just like obsessed with his paintbrush collection and like, ooh, it's got to have like horsehair for this or whatever. And then just completely ignored actually looking at the roof of the Sistine Chapel, you know what I mean? But engineers are closer to like paintbrush engineers than they are like canvas painter. You know what I mean? So everybody is so focused on their tools that they lose sight of the bigger picture. And it's why I regularly have a vocal chain with like 15 plugins on it, and we just bypass every single one of them, and it sounds great, or at least way better than how they had it. And what happens very often too is I'll bypass the 15 plugins that were on the vocal, and I'll hear a vocal stem that had processing on it as well. So a common scenario is an artist maybe, and this is at the highest levels of music, an artist or whatever will do their vocal and put some stuff on it, or maybe there'll be a writing session or something, they'll put some stuff on it, then they'll send a wet stem of that vocal to a producer that will do more work around it, and then they add their vocal chain to what vocal was already there. And by the way, no one's ever listening to their processing along the way. They're just acting. And it sounds funny, but I swear to you, this is every session I get.
I know.
So it's that bad at the highest levels. In fact, at the highest levels, it's usually worse. So you might be in a situation where there is a vocal that sounds incredible with like nothing. And I'm not like a minimalist. I'm like, what feels the best, right? So I'm not like some like old hat. It's got to be like vintage analog stuff and you can't touch it. No, I just want the maximum emotion possible, right? But so much emotion is removed by destructive processing. So much, even in rap songs, like so much of the rapper's pocket is just ruined by 4, 5, 6 compressors that have attack and release things that are like moving all over the place, messing up the pocket. No one's actually listening and feeling. Yeah. And it's because we've all gotten obsessed with the paintbrush. And we're all super visual. Like another thing we go into, if you keep going with the course, so you went through the katana chapter, so you saw like about the split station setup and everything. I really need to get my head out of the computer, because anytime I'm looking at the DAW screen, the visual part of my brain takes over and the creative part of my brain just goes away. So over the last several years, I've transitioned away from really spending so much time looking at the computer. And in both my home studio and my East-West studio, we have like the computer world over here, and then I have a console, which is like a control surface, not analog, a control surface that I can adjust plug-in parameters, all my balances, set all my effects, not looking at a screen. Because when I'm not looking at the screen, the visual part of my brain shuts down and this creative part of my brain wakes up. And it's like, to an extent you would never realize until you actually try it. Like I used to mix everything on mouse and keyboard, you know, just like everybody else. It wasn't until I took like a leap of faith and tried it a different way that I realized how I don't think I was ever really even mixing before until I switched to that process. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. Overprocessing, doing way too much, and just not listening and feeling.
That's the big thing. I would piggyback on that just to say that I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is, I love the word you use, that people are just acting without listening, because they go in there and they feel like, I'm supposed to do stuff to the vocal. And I feel like there's sometimes maybe this insecurity that's in it. Like, I haven't done enough yet. It can't possibly be good. Instead of, the process that I recommend is like, you listen, you're not allowed to touch anything, and you have to like not look at it and just say, what if anything needs to change? And how many people just stop to take that moment, like just meditatively listen to the music and say, what if anything needs to change? And then if 1 or 2 ideas come up, oh, the vocal should be brighter than it is, then you just work on that. Instead of putting on a ton of plugins, just say, okay, brighter where and what direction? But just first stop and ask yourself, what if anything needs to change? It would solve so much of this death spiraling, but we all get into the death spiral sometimes anyway.
Uh-oh. We lost it.
Oh, I'm still with you, but I think I'm just starting to lose your feed. So, Jeff, there's a chance that you might need to call back in.
Oh, you're back.
There you are.
Okay.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. We never lost stream health on my side, so people still heard me rambling.
We're back.
You might have lost some of my ramble, but honestly, all of my ramble is just repeating things that you said in slightly different words, because this is, again, I feel like we're kindred spirits, because every time I hear you talk about this stuff, I'm like, this is a point in one of my courses. And I think that You go so much deeper. You have even more credibility and experience than me. If anyone has liked my courses, I think they're going to like your courses, or this course, which is like the size of 5 courses. So check it out, SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. But can I give you one of my things that sometimes, for me, an indication that a lot of these issues are probably going to be in the mix? I don't know if you experience this, and maybe this is me throwing shade. I don't want to throw too much shade, but I find that when I get things that are mixed at like a super high sample rate, like 96K or 192, they are often some of the worst mixes I get. Now, this isn't always true. There are some amazing people who are mixing at super high sample rates, and I think maybe at higher level in industries, you see it more often. But when I find more, up and coming people who are working in their bedroom studios and they're at 96K, it's almost invariably on the lower half of mix quality that I get. And I think it's just indicative of focusing on, like, they think that there's something in the tool that's going to fix it. Meanwhile, it's like, okay, is your low end anywhere in the same ballpark as your favorite records? Are you compressing your vocals in a even remotely similar way to your favorite records? Those kinds of things are just completely gone in so many of those mixes, because it's just indicative of focusing on things that matter less instead of that matter more.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation between focusing on silly things like sample rate that don't matter or like have such a profoundly small impact. People obsess over the paintbrush. It's got to be 96 kilohertz. Meanwhile, I can't hear the difference between 44.1 and 96 probably, but that same person will be mixing in a room that isn't tuned or calibrated to be neutral reference. Okay, so everything that they're doing is junk anyway. And since they're so obsessed with the technical aspects of it, there's just a direct correlation. Like you said, generally, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions on Earth, the people that obsess about those type of things, obsess about the paintbrush, their canvas is ugly. And this is very common, and I see it all the time. It's the same thing. Usually the producer that has loads and loads and loads of like vintage cool analog gear, their mixes are terrible because they decided to focus on the paintbrush at the expense of the canvas, okay? Now there's 1 or 2 people out there that doesn't apply to, but it's almost, we call it being like doofus mode when you're like caring about stuff like that. It's the same situation where someone will spend like 6 hours tweaking the recording of a drum kit, but not actually like tune the snare drum or like select the proper snare for the song. Yes. It's like a pyramid thing where like people obsess about the stuff that doesn't matter.
100%. And that's really
all Mixerbrain.
Yes, I feel like we're trash talking people, but by the same token, I have done all these things wrong in my own life, and I imagine that you have at some point as well.
Same.
That's
okay,
why you
so
speak
that's
to
why
it
Mixerbrain's effective is because everything I teach in Mixerbrain, I was that guy at some point. You know what I mean? If you go back and open my sessions, like for example, we mixed the song Stargazing by The Neighborhood in Mixerbrain. So that's a song I mixed 4 or 5 years ago. The plug-in total on that mix from 4 or 5 years ago is probably like triple what it is on this mix this year. And I used just the principles that I teach in the course to mix it, right? We have this idea in our heads that to do like top 40, like impactful, polished, badass mixes, we have to do all these tools. And I was like, I'm showing you firsthand. I do the whole mix in front of you in the course after I teach the principles. Like, here's how these principles apply to a platinum selling song, and here how it's gonna sound platinum selling, doing almost nothing other than focusing on the principles of art and emotion. And then people are like, oh my God, mixing is actually like so much easier than I've made it the whole time. And this is only because I was the biggest death spiraler. Okay. I was the biggest, everything that I teach in Mixerbrain is like, I've done the opposite throughout the journey. Like, if I had Mixerbrain when I was starting out, what took me 15 years to figure out would have done in 2, because you still have to develop your art and aesthetic and all that stuff along the way. But like, yeah, it's like I made all these mistakes myself. I was the biggest engineer asshat along the way. I didn't know what I was doing. In fact, my biggest shift was I just followed what everybody told me to do, just like everybody else. In fact, you can, like so many people, spend 10 years trying to get good at mixing and they never do because they just keep doubling down on what everybody's telling them to do. Meanwhile, the way I was able to figure it out and start achieving what I wanted to achieve, there was one day where I was just like, you know what? I think maybe almost everybody is not doing this right. Like, had this epiphany is like, because it takes a big ego to be like, oh, nearly everybody out there is just wrong and I'm right. Or at least like maybe everybody is just went at some point they went down this weird direction and I'm like, we need a course correction here. And then I started trying to figure out the principles of art and emotion. And that took me many years of discovery and making mistakes and this and that. But I was watching, there's been so many times throughout human history when the whole herd went one way and it just wasn't the right way, but it seemed like the right way. And we talk about this a little bit in Mixerbrain. There was a point, remember, if you look at like the Red Barons plane in World War I or whatever, it had like 3 wings stacked on top of each other, right?
Yeah.
Airplanes don't have 3 wings anymore, right? But there was a point when airplanes started with 1 wing and then they went to 2 and then someone made a 3-winged airplane and there was a part of it that was better. It wasn't the wings, but just because the overall plane was doing better, like, oh, 3 wings is the way. And eventually someone had to be like, everybody says 3 wings is good, but I think it's not good. You know what I mean? I was watching this YouTube video last night about the guy. So when they're inventing LED lights, the red LED and the green LED were super easy to make, but the blue LED was almost impossible. And it took 30 years after red and green to make blue. And why blue is so important, with red, green, and blue, we can make every other color. And that's why we have like hue lighting systems and LED screens and everything. It's like amazing now. But everybody was going the wrong way on how to make the blue LED for years. Except for one person was like, I don't know, like, let's do this way that everybody says isn't going to work. And it ended up that his way works. So there's a lot of stuff about modern mixing that everybody holds as the religion that is just not correct and not helpful. And the first group of people have been through Mixerbrain now. And I think it's been, like, the reviews have been insane because they're like, like they're all kind of sensing something's weird about the way we're learning this stuff and we're not figuring it out. And just returning to this other approach seems so much simpler and it's really been changing a lot of people's lives. So the reviews have been insane. And I kind of knew it would be because I just figure out this is what everybody's doing wrong. This is what's really transformed me. Here's how I do it. And I'm going to prove it to you instead of just showing you what plugins I use. So, yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Man, there's so much in here that I can relate to. I want to give you another example. Just again, this is kind of piggybacking on points that you've made, but this idea of listening instead of just tweaking and spiraling. I'll tell you one common thing that comes up that I've been noticing a lot. You made this comment about people not death spiraling enough on creative, interesting effects. So one thing that I've noticed a whole bunch is I'll get tracks where people have, because I actually do open a lot of people's DAW sessions, not mixing anymore. I haven't mixed professionally in years, but I do have a coaching section. So people go to members.sonicscoop.com and we crack open people's mixes and I get to actually now see their DAWs. And I've done one-on-one coaching calls for a while where they open up their DAW and we see everything that's in there. And one of the big things sometimes I'll see is that there'll be a ton of plugins on the vocal, but then you go over to the Reverb channel and the Reverb send has no plugins after it. And they're doing all this EQ to the vocal, one EQ counteracting the other. But the big thing that they should have done or need to do is EQ the damn reverb return. Like all of your favorite reverb sounds and all of your favorite records, practically all of them have an EQ'd return where they're not just 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And people will be obsessing over the vocal track. And it's like, you really just need to take a high cut filter and just take out everything above 5K on this reverb. And it will all of a sudden sound more like reverbs on actual records that you like. And I don't know, is that a technique? Is that a trick? Or is that a principle? It's just one of these things where there's this one big, obvious, dumb, broad move you could make, cutting high end out of your reverb. And if you just did that, you wouldn't have to do these 9,000 fiddly moves that aren't doing anything, where adjusting your reverb would. Do you ever run into that kind of thing?
Yeah, a little bit. It's like if people would obsess on just picking what is the reverb that matches the emotion of this moment, right? And helps me fall into the daydream of the song. That's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about, you know what I mean? And when you do that and you get your balances right, a lot of times everything else resolves itself. There's definitely times when I'm doing similar things like cutting out low end. In fact, I have a plate reverb here at East West that is like a very boomy kind of low end to it that I'm typically, but like a lot of these issues with EQ are also evaporate the moment the balance is set perfectly.
Right.
For example, you know, if your reverb return is just it's just like too much like brightness in it, or maybe it's too boomy or whatever. Maybe the reverb return is just too loud. Like that's a big thing that I like all the time is like once you start hitting your balances perfectly and setting the art and the emotion of everything really well, a lot of these EQ issues will like suddenly just evaporate and resolve themselves. Another cool thing that's really interesting, and we kind of see this in Mixerbrain if you get further into it. There was like a module called the Jeff Ellis Worldwide Top Secret Vocal Chain module. I don't want to, no spoiler alerts on that, but one of the things that we realized, you could probably guess what my vocal chain is, but no spoilers. You have to buy the course.
All right.
An interesting thing is you can have, let's say a vocal is a little too dark, right? By introducing a reverb to it, a lot of times that starts to fill up the lacking in brightness in a very interesting way. So there's a lot of things that we can do, again, just by just balance that make the need for like carving frequencies go away. I've noticed like since my room got calibrated to be neutral reference, like perfect, and I started mixing at my magic mixing volume and all these like foundational principle things get locked in, the need for any form of EQing and compression and processing, it goes away like 90%, and then everything starts feeling and sounding bigger and fuller and more impactful. And what I envision like a top 40 sound to be, except now all the top 40 music sounds terrible. If you go down New Music Friday, like almost you can't even understand any lyrics anymore. So that's another thing I want to talk about, this idea of like, ooh, make it sound like the pros or whatever. It's like, just go to New Music Friday on Spotify and just compare how records sound today to how they sounded 30 years ago. It's like just the ability to fall into the daydream of a song is just being destroyed by Mixerbrain. And the top pros in the world do this. And sometimes it's our fault and sometimes it's not our fault. Sometimes everything's been destroyed by the time it gets to us. But there's a lot of overprocessing done by the top most expensive mixers in the world. And now that we live in an era of normalization, a lot of the people that made their entire mixing style to be as like loud and bright as possible, now they're mixing and they didn't focus on emotion and art. Now that Spotify's normalizing everything, it's very revealing. It's like, I'm not sure if you ever actually were great at mixing. It's just you were getting things loud without artifacts, and it's a different game now. So this is a cool time for young mixers to step up and focus on art and emotion. It's never been a better time because there's way less pressure to be loud.
Yeah,
right?
You have a great section about that in the course. I was surprised at just how much time you spent on it. Yeah, the battlefield early on in the course. And we won't talk about in this episode because this could be another great trick that people can go into the course to learn. But there are ways to exploit the loudness in Spotify and streaming services like it without smashing your stuff. And now the loudest mixes potentially are more dynamic mixes, but there's certain ways of doing that. I love how you get into the shenanigans line. You have these little kind of hacks and cheats where it's like you can make your stuff without squashing it sound not just as loud as, but potentially even louder than really squashed mixes by making them more dynamic, but by doing that strategically. Now, a little bit of that has to happen at the production stage. Some of it can happen at the mixing stage. And if you guys want to learn how to make things sound really loud on streaming without squashing things, I think get the courses at SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. That's SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. And there's some great insights in there. We could do a whole 30-minute live stream just on this one concept of loudness. So I don't want to go too deep into it.
That's why the course is 24 hours long, because I could go in on everything. But that's why I try to keep it super silly and have all these little movies and this and that, because I always watch this show on YouTube called Wristwatch Revival, and this guy just like revives old wristwatches. And I don't know anything about watches or wristwatches, but as someone, it's still interesting to me watching this thing. And I wanted to make Mixerbrain so anybody in the world, even people not into music mixing at all, would still really enjoy and love the course. And that was my goal. And in fact, I got one reviewer who bought the course that bought it just because they followed me on Instagram and does not care about mixing at all, and they told me they really enjoyed it, and they were surprised because they're not like someone into mixing at all. And I was like, yes, that was my goal. I wanted it to be like a thing where you could just put it on and it's like it can get you in, because if you get people laughing, you can get them to start to break away from their religion a little bit.
Right. It is super fun. It's not dry at all, and it's entertaining the whole time. I think the other thing that's great about it is it could be accessible to someone in like short attention span Gen Z because there's this bite-sized fun stuff. I think it could also be accessible to someone who's like middle-aged and wants to get better at mixing.
Yeah, it's got to be for everybody.
It could be accessible to musicians who don't even care about mixing their own stuff, but want to understand what mixing's about, because it's almost like you're slapping the whole, audio obsession out of people's mouths and being like, stop talking about frequencies, stop talking about, which specific plugin and do I need? No, stop talking about this stuff, and here's what matters in mixing. And I think if the average musician watched the first few hours of this course, they would just calm down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some of the modules in there are almost like conversations that you have with artists that you work with who feel like they have to put the engineer producer hat on. And you're like, no, take that shit off. I try to take the producer and engineer hat off. You should too. Let's just talk like people who love music again. And I think to a degree, just the vibe check that people can get, just the kind of the passion and the confidence to be musical again that people can get from taking this course is as good as any of the tricks or techniques or audio principles that are in it.
Yeah. I basically built this course for the artists that I work with, the producers that I work with, A&Rs, managers.
Oh, yes. A&R people should definitely take this course. Even the first 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, that was my other goal, is not a course just for people that want to be professional mixers. For artists, this course is going to help artists and producers and mixers and engineers, because it's all Mixerbrain, right? Now, there'll be a couple things that are more relevant for producers in the course. There'll be a couple things that are more relevant for artists in the course. There'll be a couple things that are more relevant for people that want to be professional mixers like me, but it's all tied together. That's why it's called Mixerbrain, because we all suffer from the same disease. But that was a main goal, is like, I don't want to just sell a course to the 100 people that are, I don't know how many people are mixers in the world, maybe 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, I don't know. It's for everybody in music production, in every genre. Yeah, I guess it's a lot, right?
We've sold thousands upon thousands of mixing breakthroughs, mastering demystified, compression breakthroughs, EQ breakthroughs. So many people are doing it.
I guess it's a lot of people.
Almost every musician now also feels like they should know something about mixing or something about the studio.
Yeah. But they're learning the wrong way, and they're making it so much harder. I noticed that my artists that I work with that sometimes record themselves, that have decided to never learn anything about mixing, their stuff sounds way better than the ones that did try to learn something about mixing, right? There's this artist that I work with named Nikki that when she records herself, it sounds way better than when a lot of the producers that she works with records and engineers their vocal, because they have Mixerbrain and put 15 plugins on her voice. Meanwhile, she just exists from a place of art, and her vocal's like perfect right out of the gate, because that's all you have is art. So let's record it right, get the emotion in the take, and then they'll send it to me and be like, Jeff, I didn't really do anything. I don't know what I'm doing. And when I hear that, I was like, yes, this is going to be easy, because I won't have to reverse engineer all the problems out of it.
I've experienced this so much, and I think most people who've gotten to audio professionally went through a stage at least at one point where they were trying to get really good at audio, and maybe they knew all the audio theory, and then all of a sudden, some kid in the bedroom with Fruity Loops makes a beat, and it sounds way better than anything they've mixed in the past year. And they're like, this is no fair. This person has been doing it for 6 months. And it's like, yeah, there's almost like an edge there. And I think there's this learning curve where sometimes we come in with the passion, the art focus, that stuff sounds great. Then we start to learn some, and then it goes down. And then we learn more and it goes back up again. And then eventually, if we break through, we can get better than the kid who is starting in his bedroom. But some people never break through that, and they actually end up worse than someone who just started because they're obsessing about the wrong things and they're trying to impress the wrong people with the wrong things and getting too technical. So
it's like the hero's
definitely.
journey of the engineer mixer is
Totally.
you start out pretty good because all you know is art.
Yeah.
Then you start learning stuff and you get worse and worse and worse. And then you're at a crossroads. And I want Mixerbrain to be that crossroads that gets everybody back to that kid in the basement just with like neutral reference monitoring and understands the parameters of loudness normalization and this and that. The things like there's minefields that you can run into. But the kid, this happened to me with Malay, Frank Ocean's producer on Channel Orange. I would watch my rough mixes, wouldn't be as good as Malay's, but I felt like I knew more because I was like an engineer. Mind you, this was like 15 years ago or something at this point, but he would just be artful and do a cool rough mix, and then I would do all this death spirals and this and techniques and tricks, and it just, I wasn't listening or even like living from a place of art.
Been there, done that. Yeah, totally. Yep. 100% been in the same exact chair where I, as the guy who graduated like audio college, was like fiddling around with the EQ and making it worse and not being able to live up to these clueless people who didn't know what they were doing. And, you know, now here I am 20 something years later of doing this professionally, where I feel like I'm much more like, the questions I ask myself these days are parts of my body involuntarily moving? And if they are not, why not? And what could come up or down slightly to make me involuntarily move again? Like, what would have to happen in this mix? Like, what comes forward that makes me connect with it emotionally? Or if like, sometimes when you're connecting with a singer, it's just involuntarily moving the head. Sometimes if you're connecting with the rhythm section, it's involuntarily moving the shoulders. And the more that I can make choices that make me move my body without intending to, the more that I know I'm going in the right direction. And it's just a different way of thinking through music. Now, Jeff, I don't want this to just be my questions. I want to take questions from the audience. So you guys type in questions. And before, if you have anything to say about that idea that I threw out, hold it for just 1 second, because we're 40 minutes into the podcast and I haven't done sponsor shout outs yet. So I've got a shout out to the podcast sponsors.
Shout outs.
The most important sponsor, as always, being you. How do you sponsor this podcast? It's easy. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, all that good stuff. But if you want to sponsor this podcast...
Trevor just did that, by the way.
Sweet.
Sorry to interrupt. Trevor did it.
No worries. The best way to sponsor this podcast is to sponsor yourself. And this is the part where I would ordinarily shout out all of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, EQ Breakthroughs, or become a member over at members.sonicscoop.com. But today I'm not going to shout out any of that stuff. I am instead going to shout out the great, illustrious Jeff Ellis, who has his own course that's just come out, his introductory special, 20% off. You have to check it out. It is Mixerbrain. You can check it out at mixerbrain.com/SonicScoop. Now, that is an affiliate link. So if you've learned about this through the podcast or through our stuff, we appreciate you going through that link. There's a 20% discount code
through the link
right now. It is Worldwide 20, I believe, is our current discount code for Jeff Ellis Worldwide, 20% off. It is a short... I think it's ending this month. I think they just have like 2 weeks left.
That's the release. We're in our first release month. So this is the release month special.
Yep. So check it out. Worldwide 20. Enter that. Go over to sonicscoop.com/mixerbrain. It will show you when you click that link, the discount code right on there in case you forget it. Sonicscoop.com/mixerbrain. Check that out. The other quick shout out I want to give is to Soundtoys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Really fun stuff that you can death spiral with in the right way, because this is stuff that is made to be like fun, to make you not obsess about numbers, and to allow you to do like weird, crazy, creative effects where you just twist knobs until it sounds more good, even if you have no idea what you're doing, which is the way that platinum selling, Grammy-winning mixer Jeff Ellis likes to mix. So check out Soundtoys.
Yeah, we get into the dark
soundtoys.com.
regions using microshift all the time to frame it, Soundtoys, in a Mixerbrain mindset. You haven't learned about the dark regions yet.
No, I'm going to finish your course, dude. No, I haven't gotten to dark regions yet.
Wait till you learn about the dark regions.
I am going to finish the course. I did like 2 days pretty intensively getting through, I think, the first 4 parts. And then I went into later bits and sampled a whole bunch of it. But I want to finish start to finish because honestly, so much of this stuff, I really think we have the same mission here. Like so much of the stuff you talk about, like in Mixing Breakthroughs, in the beginning of it, I have a module that is all about like, you're not allowed, like I give people exercises in the course. And one of the first exercises is you have to do a mix using nothing but volume and pan. You are not allowed to touch EQ. You're not allowed to touch compression. You're not even allowed to put on any effects unless they're baked into the track. And I want you to spend 1 to 2 hours doing nothing but EQ. And I also want you to try it 2 or 3 different ways. So we go through this idea called tier theory. So it's one of my principles that you have like A tier elements, B tier elements, and C tier elements. You have 1 or 2 things that are the focal point of any mix in any given section or any given moment. There's 1 or 2 elements that can be the focal point. And then you have your B tier elements that are kind of supporting characters that are the next most important kind of foundational elements in the mix. And then there's the everything else, whose job is to stay out of the way of and not detract from the emotional impact of the A tier while adding character and personality to the mix. And then I give people the exercise of, okay, now once you've done that first mix using nothing but volume and pan, now you have to reimagine. You have to pick 2 totally different elements to be your A tier elements. So I give exercises like that. And it just reminds me so much of the kind of stuff that you're talking about. And this is why I love having you on, because you're one of the guys who gets it.
Yeah, we call it the Eye of Sauron.
Ooh,
have you gotten to the Eye of Sauron?
Oh, no, I've got to get to that module.
What you call A tier, we call the Eye of Sauron.
I love it. See, we're saying the same things with different language, and some people are going to prefer Jeff's personality to mine, and some people who've taken my courses, you should take Jeff's courses, because his courses hammer home the stuff that I'm trying to get to you, but even more fun, more betterer, and from another angle and another approach and another
I would love to go through your course.
That stuff.
I would love to go through this course, too. Yeah, I'm always trying to, I'm constantly, just like jiu-jitsu, constantly trying to get better. There'll definitely be something in there that I overlooked in my journey. You know what I mean? So I'm always trying to learn. Yeah.
Well, selfishly, while we're asking for audio questions to come in, because we have been talking about martial arts, we are both guys who own katanas. I had to take mine out. I took mine outside.
Where's
and I was
my
slicing
katana?
Water bottles with it. I think Trevor said he was going to stage yours.
Is yours good? Mine was the cheapest one you could get on Amazon.
So was mine, but it's surprisingly good. This one is super sharp, dude. I think it was like $120 katana, but it was on Black Friday special for $80. And I got this thing, and it is actually beautiful. I'm surprised. If anyone wants to know my katana picks, let me know, and I'll try to go in the comments. I'll see if I can find it and put a Amazon link in there. But fun. This one's sharp. I have a bunch of dull practice swords too, and I'm also a jiu-jitsu nerd. So selfishly, I have to ask, while we're getting audio-related questions that come in, give me 2 of your favorite jiu-jitsu positions or submissions for any jiu-jitsu nerds who are currently watching.
Ooh, gosh.
Or you could just say 2 favorite guards. What are your 2 favorite guards that you would most commonly play in jiu-jitsu?
I'm trying to think. I do, man, I've really gotten good at the whole Kimura Trap series.
Ooh, love that.
Which is like really kind of like an easy series to master. I'm an armbar guy, so I do a lot of that sort of stuff. I love sweeping people from the guard. I like to have fun, like do the kind of sweeps where people go up in the air and they're like, "What the heck just happened to me?"
I think sweeping it to me is the heart and soul of jiu-jitsu, sport jiu-jitsu, because it's a thing that is the most fun to do. It's kind of like, in a way, it's one of the less self-defensive things. I mean, it's very important. Sweep, for those of you who don't know, is you're on bottom, someone's in your guard, and you get on top. And you score 2 points for that in a jiu-jitsu competition. But it's like, it's so much fun to do. Like, especially, I like a good butterfly sweep where you really get someone up in the air. It's almost like a judo throw from on the ground. Yeah. It's so satisfying. Yeah.
Indubitably.
And Kimura Trap is great because the Kimura Trap, it can get you on top, and then you have armbar there. You have Kimura, obviously. You have side triangles. You have the scissor choke, which is one of my favorites, where you just clamp your legs around their neck. And
I do that all the time to people,
Good one. Love it. All right.
That's a blue belt slayer technique.
Yes. Now, you are purple belt currently. I remember you were working towards brown belt last I checked.
I do have a brown belt now.
You are? Oh, congrats. When did that happen?
Yeah. Several months ago. I'm still a new brown belt. I've probably been a brown belt for like 3 months. It happened in the middle of making Mixerbrain.
Sweet. Yeah. I'm currently purple belt. Hopefully I'm not too far behind you. I just did my 4th purple belt competition just on my birthday. It was on February 22nd. My birthday is February 23rd. I feel like I want to do a competition every birthday until I'm like 50, and then I stop doing competitions.
How much do you weigh and how old are you?
I am 43. And I compete, my ideal weight class, I'm not a particularly large person. I'm not very tall. You've met me in person. I usually compete at 155. If I could, my ideal would be compete at 145 pounds. When I get down to 145 pounds, I look like Skeletor, like I'm shredded and my face is sallow. And my wife's like, if you're going to look like that, you can compete as much as you want because I'll have like visible abs at 40. But here's the thing. No other 145 guys want to compete in jiu-jitsu. So usually I compete 155. And then often enough, I can't find people in the masters or seniors bracket at 155. So I often compete at 170. And I've also competed as high as 180. And I've done the absolutes. And it was the 185 division where I went 0-0 in the gold medal match, and they gave it to the other guy for decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was on the, fair enough. I was in the bottom the whole time. I couldn't sweep him, way bigger. But I just got gold in no-gi and silver in gi back in the February competition. That was 170 pounds. I went for the 170-pound division. I weighed 153 that morning. So
nice. Yeah, I'm not even really much of a sport guy. I never compete. I just straight up hobbyist. Yep. I compete with my friends, and
yeah, of course.
Life is trying to be a top music in the world, mixer in the world is enough competition for me. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I might do it now though, but it's I just like to have fun with it. I'm super chill about it, but it is my favorite hobby for sure.
It's so great. I like to say it's the best bad habit I've ever had, and I've had all the bad habits, especially working in music. You can collect bad habits. However, it's the best bad habit I've ever had. All right, let's get back into things that's not going to make our normal audio nerd audience tune out, which is audio stuff. So let's get into audio stuff here. I have questions coming in. Did you have any statements you want to make on any of the stuff that I was talking about before we get into questions from the audience, or am I good to ask the first question?
Yeah, let's do the audience questions.
Heathen says Jimmy says, he says Justin's courses are great, but I want to hear people talking about how Jeff's courses are great. We'll get to that. And he says, now in Kajabi too. Yes. Heathen says, I need Jeff to know how devastated I was after clicking that Frank Ocean's STEM link. So I'm guessing you put a little Easter egg in there that people...
There's Mixerbrain's full of traps and tricks and shenanigans. Yeah. There's a whole murder subplot too, but we'll keep that on the DL for now. Yeah. Not everybody survives Mixerbrain.
Uh-oh. Our first earnest question is, I see Murphy's still alive. I think she's still breathing back there. He's breathing back there. So that's clearly not the victim.
Yeah, he's good.
I just woke him up. Yeah. J-Dub says, can I ask what your best advice is for a 2-track? Instrumental that is already mastered and a vocal recording over top. Do you have mixing advice? So are you ever confronted with situations where you really just are given a 2-track stereo stem and a vocal to work with? And what are your recommendations for what to do in those circumstances?
Well, a lot of times, so everybody's so bad at making stems these days. Like most producers, even the best ones on earth, can't replicate their production aesthetic in stems properly. That's a huge problem. We address that in Mixerbrain. But what I would do is don't stress out. It's going to be okay. AI stem separation's fantastic nowadays. So the paradigm on this has just changed in the last year. But take that master 2-track. A lot of times that master 2-track is going to be better than what the producer would have been able to send to you anyway with stems. This is something we face all the time. And again, it's very common.
How come the stems don't sound like the mix?
Yeah, but every time. But so we're we just need just give me the DAW session. And a lot of times we're getting a DAW session of the beat and a DAW session of the vocal. And it's but we're operating at a high level of service here. That not everybody's going to be able to do, but don't stress out about that's another thing. People are like, oh, it's the 2-track, it's whatever. It's you got to stay fluid in mixing, right? A lot of times people lose the session and there's just a 2-track, and a lot of times the 2-track is just a better option anyway. So what I would do nowadays is RX11 has an ability to separate a 2-track into 4 stems. And then there's a couple other ones out there. I actually ran into Sean Everett at Soho House the other day.
He's a great one.
Talking about, I never met him before, but we hung out for a second, and he was saying that he uses something called Nebulous or Nebulon or Nebulon. There's options out there. I would stem separate your 2-track and use that. And then what's the objective of the song? What's the core emotional element? And just focus on the principles, and you should be good. If the 2-track is pretty limited, you might be in a situation where there's not loads of dynamic range or whatever. But again, we're talking about following what is the core emotional element, highlighting that, and then stem separation on the 2-track. You should be good. You know what I mean?
Sweet.
So
Let's keep going a little rapid fire because I want to see if we can get you out of here in under an hour and right at the 50-minute mark.
Fast
We've gotten so much out of you. This has been great, Jeff. So J-Dub says Mixerbrain has changed.
East-West Internet's terrible.
Well, we still hear you. You're still in good shape. I almost want to wait till he's back so I can read this next one to him so he can hear it. Because it's just praise for the course. Yeah. No worries. J-Dub says, Mixerbrain has changed my mixing career, by the way. Highly recommended. Double exclamation point.
Thank you.
Emperor Kamikaze says, yeah, beat makers sell the beat and then move on. Here's one from the Mads Christian who says, Justin typically recommends a top-down mixing approach. I wouldn't say that's quite accurate. I'm curious what Jeff's take on that is. So what I recommend is, in the Mixing Breakthroughs course, I do recommend a kind of bus-centered approach where it's a good idea to group like instruments together into buses. And then I also recommend that if you are going to mix through things like compression, then you should apply those earlier in the mix rather than later and mix through them rather than just slap them onto the top of an already made mix. So I have caveats there where there are certain styles where significant amounts of bus processing is the sound of that genre, and there's certain sounds you won't get without significant amounts of bus compression, but there are also styles where you shouldn't do that. So there's a lot more nuance to that, but I do like to go through busing like instruments together, and occasionally compressing using dynamics processing on like instrument groups. But your thoughts, do you like to use anything on your main bus, and do you like to use subgroups at all in the mix?
The first thing I want to zoom it out a little bit farther. Yeah. So the original question do you prefer a top-down approach or I guess a bottom-up approach?
He just said, do you prefer a top-down approach? And I think top-down approach is something that's famous on the internet for basically put a lot of processing on your mix bus and let that do the mix for you.
So this is like a Mixerbrain thing. Like even asking that question is focusing on, we always want to have what is the process, the best process that's going to get us from point A to point B in the best way, right? Is that a top-down approach? Is it a bottom-up approach? And one of the things that we push pretty heavily in Mixerbrain is there is no approach that just works every time, right? So it's all about forming a strategy. What is the optimal strategy for this particular piece of art, right? So that literally might be a 2-track and a vocal, okay? That might be starting the song over by removing a bunch of stuff and rebuilding everything. Sometimes it's literally adding 1%. So we're not even going to even touch anything that was in the DAW session. So whether the optimal strategy to work on a piece of art would be a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach or this and that is really dependent on what's going on with this mix. I like to look at a mix as remodeling a house, right? So when you're remodeling a house, you don't want to jack up the cool tile in the bathroom, but maybe the fixtures could be replaced. So you replace that. So I have used templates that just, get some tracks into VCAs and subgroups just for ease of doing a thing quickly. Yes. But because I focus so much on balance, if I'm running into too many compressors downstream, a lot of times that causes problems in me achieving the best microdynamics and macrodynamics.
Because it reels in some of the changes that you make. Yeah.
But that being said, sometimes when I'm hired to mix a song and I listen to it, I'm like, this is near perfect. I might have a DAW session that has loads of compressors downstream, this and that, and it's in my best interest to not completely undo that and because the song's almost finished, right? So break out of the mindset that there's the best strategy for mixing, everything down to how we receive files. I call it the fluidity principle. We have to stay fluid, and we have to make what's the optimal approach to get to the finish line on this particular piece of song to achieve the objective of what I'm hearing I want the mix to be. So that's my philosophy on that. Yeah.
Here's a good question. He's brought up another one of your principles. This reminds me of a jiu-jitsu course I took once from, it was Henry Gracie and his brother Haron did a course called The 32 Principles of Jiu-Jitsu, and it was a fun format, and yours feels a little bit like that. Broke Rabbit asks, what are the 5 fundamentals to make a good mix? I don't know if you can answer that question specifically, but he says, what are the 5 fundamentals to make a good mix? Can you answer that question? And if not, can you throw out what do you think are 5 of the most powerful principles in the course?
What are the 5? I mean, the most powerful one, it's literally the chapters of the course, right? So I'm just going to read that. Mixerbrain, just getting rid of your Mixerbrain is the overarching, returning yourself to a place of a feeling brain. chapter 2, the battlefield, you really have to understand the current loudness war that there is today. People are still trying to win the old loudness war, but there's a new loudness war. So understanding the parameters of the battlefield, right? And then the next chapter, the katana, which is your weapon, like getting your studio environment set up to where you can actually be successful in channeling art. And then I think the most important thing just in mixing is balance. So that's like fundamental. And I mean, it just goes on from there. But was that 5? I mean, I stacked all the like the big. Yeah, and I mean, I have a thing called quadrants of love, which is a way of thinking about panning that no one really ever thinks about. But there's so many. I don't know. There's not 5 principles. There's probably like more like 40. But
yes.
Magic mixing volume. So there's so many. Yeah, but yeah, continue.
I think we're at about an hour. Do you want to cut it here? Or do you want to keep on going for questions? Because we could try
if
to.
There's more questions. I can answer questions.
All right, we'll take a few
but
more.
If they're not, we'll go.
There absolutely are.
Okay,
and
cool.
I just want to be respectful of your time because I know
I'm
how
cool
long
I'm cool with time.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm cool with time.
So we'll do a few more. Ruman says, "Hi there. I bought Mixerbrain. I saw Greasy Will talking about it. I'm not sure if I know Greasy Will. And I'm so grateful having access to this knowledge, especially since I'm just starting out with music. I'm 21 years old.
Perfect.
But I wanted to ask, what's the best way to get myself into having strong basics? Since I most struggle with the first steps more than the rules and approach of the mix." You have any
That's
way
like
of
literally what I made Mixerbrain to be the answer to that question. So just take the course, and it's literally, I literally designed it for what I needed as a person in this person's situation. So yeah, just literally, it's a 24-hour course on answering that question right there. So it's the principles, a principle-based mindset. Forget about techniques. You were mentioning the 32 principles that Huron and Henner taught in jiu-jitsu. I started realizing through learning jiu-jitsu, when I was trying to memorize all the techniques, I would like level up so slowly. But when I started thinking about the principles, once you master the principles, you can improv the whole art based on the principles, right? So if you're soloing on the fretboard as a guitarist, if you master like the principles, you can start improving, right? But if you try to memorize every single lick in the history of rock and roll, it's like too much, right?
Yeah.
So a principle-based mindset. When you're young, just accept that everything that you see, for the most part, I mean, there's good people out there like Justin, but like almost everything on the internet is just bad information. And even a lot of times coming from the top people in the industry, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. And
sometimes the top people don't even know what they're doing. They're doing something right without even knowing what it is. And then, as you mentioned, there are certain top releases that you might not want to emulate as well. Those are things to think about.
Things could be true.
Yeah, I remember when, maybe I can tie this back to audio, but I remember one of the first times I encountered this conceptual-based learning, the principle-based learning approach. It was a jiu-jitsu course from Kit Dale, and he said something about sweeps, which we were talking about, how to get from being on bottom to on top. And he's like, if you take away people's posts, meaning they can't put out an arm or a leg, you get their center of gravity over your center of gravity, and you apply force in the direction of the post, they will fall over. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. He's like, every sweep is just those 3 things.
Yeah.
Get their weight
I don't know
over
any
you.
Sweeps. I just do the principles, you know?
Exactly. And I think the same exact thing applies to audio. And this is why it's good to have, more than one hobby, or if audio is your hobby, how rich audio could be for the rest of your life, where once you learn principles in audio, in something fun, how much you can take out of that and bring back into your everyday work life. Or if you are an audio person like me or like Jeff, I recommend having a hobby outside of audio, because you can learn so much in a kind of a roundabout way, which jiu-jitsu has done for me. But I think audio can do that for you if you're outside of audio, and some other hobby can do that for your audio and music life if you're in audio and music. Another question for you. Jimmy Italiano writes in. He did a super chat, gave us $5. So Jimmy, thank you so much. There's a ton of questions in here, more questions than we can get to. Jimmy. So if you want to get yours to the top of the list, feel free to do a super chat, even if it's $1 or whatever. We'll prioritize super chats because then we'll know you're super serious. But Jimmy Italiano asks, can a Slate VSX headphone or any headphone rooms make up for a bad room? What do you think? What do you think about the idea of headphones as being a supplement or replacement if you're in a bad room? So I know one of your big things is sharpening the katana, making sure you have the best room and neutral listening environment. But for people who don't have access to that yet, what do you think about the approach of something like Slate VSX or another headphone-based monitoring system?
So I don't like to talk too much on stuff that I don't super understand. I'm not aware at how great humans have at getting headphones to neutral reference, meaning like what you're hearing inside of the computer is accurate to what you're hearing outside of the computer. So I've never personally been able to be comfortable on headphones. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but so yeah, I'd like I this question comes up a lot. I just, if you have to be at a basically something I call a magic listening volume.
Yeah.
But yeah, a bad room is like, stop wasting your time. Correct that first before doing anything. Yep. You're wasting your time in mixing if you're not close to neutral reference. Now, this isn't a term that everybody's familiar with. It just, I want to say flat, but basically neutral reference means your speakers are creating what's inside of the computer in the real world pretty close to what it is inside of the computer. Like, we should try to get there as close to that as possible. And like, I haven't figured out how to do it with headphones, and I don't know enough to say you can't do it. And I haven't tried the Slate stuff, but I see a lot of these headphone emulators that try to emulate like these famous producers' rooms with their like particular speakers. It's like, that's just Mixerbrain right there. It's like, we don't know, is that person's room neutral reference? And like, most people's speakers aren't neutral reference. So like, why are you even trying to emulate that anyway? A lot of the top mixers aren't even neutral reference, and they suffer as a result. So, yeah, I can't answer that question. I just don't know. I've never found, I actually say this in the course, I've never figured out how to do it. It would be awesome if I could. But yeah, if your room is messed up, you're wasting your time mixing. So I would try to. But in the course, we show how we can take a bedroom, and we did this at my house. We take a normal bedroom and we get it to neutral reference without spending a lot of money, and then how to calibrate your system affordably to get you to neutral reference, and then how to listen at a neutral reference volume, and all these things. It's not as difficult as you think. So you can do this in any bedroom.
And I love that you bring up in the course the idea of this repeated listening level. I think it's so important because things do sound different at different levels. Our ears are different levels of flat at different levels. And coming back again and again to similar listening levels, I think is big. That's something you talk about there. And you talk about a lot about the room, which is so huge. Honestly, between room and speakers, I think the room makes a bigger impact. I mean, if you could have a $300 pair of monitors in a well-treated room, or a $30,000 pair of monitors in a gymnasium, I'm choosing the $300 pair of speakers in the treated room, every day of the week. And I know that right now you're using not incredibly expensive monitors. And in fact, there's a good segue into that. Eric Wassel says, "Hi, Jeff. Do you think that the Kali IN8 V2s are good for mixing rock music?" So he's asking, can you mix rock music on the Kalis? And your answer is just flat out yes.
Yeah, I think they're actually, I'll take it one step further. I think they're actually the best speakers for mixing music around. Like, that's why I use them. You know what I mean? I've had I've had $90,000 speakers. I've had $11,000 speakers. I've had $6,000 speakers. I can afford, not to brag, I mean, I'm a professional. I get business loans to buy this stuff.
Sure.
I've had the most expensive stuff. Kali audio speakers, calibrated to neutral reference, are by far the best thing out there that I've tried. Okay. Now, why is this? One, Charles, the speaker designer, is a genius, and he focused on this perspective of not trying to make your speakers sound good or bad. Like, if you have speakers that sound good, that's not a good thing. Like, it's artificially changing. Exactly. So if you have smiley face speakers, you're going to have a frown mix. And I know this because I used to have smiley face speakers, and so many of my mixes were frowny, okay?
Yeah.
So, but when I was younger, I was insecure, so I had to have the most expensive speakers so that people would love me, okay? Yes. Now, what I learned is no one loved me because of my speakers. And now
they only hated you more because they didn't have those speakers.
Yeah. So I've mixed Spotify #1 global records on Kali IN8s and that's just what it is. So, and once I switched to those speakers and got them neutral reference, again, it's not just the speaker, it's the placement. We talk about in this, of course, speaker placement, listening position makes a huge difference. Acoustic treatment makes a difference as well. And then the volume that you mix at makes a huge difference. Yeah. And then speaker calibration. Now, it sounds so complicated. It's not. But luckily, you can do the best mixes in the world of any genre on IN8s. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I do it. I've been doing it. And actually, when I switched to this way of doing things, the neutral reference mindset, the amount of time that it took me to get a mix sounding good and feeling right was like cut in half. It's like not a subtle difference, right? So yeah, we have this big problem in audio where we think that the most expensive stuff is just better, and it's just not. Like, there's a lot of hornswoggles, as we say in the course, a lot of hornswoggles. But yeah, the Cali stuff, they don't pay me anything. I do have an affiliate link for them, so I guess I could, but I've never even cashed that in. So I don't work for the company. Everybody thinks I'm like a shill for Cali. It's like, no, it just changed my life. There's IN5s right in front of me. In my other room, I have a whole Cali Audio Atmos system here. In my other room, I have IN5s and IN8s. And then at my home studio, I have IN8s and the unreleased super top secret Santa Monica 8s, which aren't quite out yet, that I've been testing out. Yeah.
The Santa Monica 5s have been released, and they sound gorgeous. They're very similar neutral reference. However, there is a little bit more, like, at least in the 5s, when I've heard compared to the other 5s, they go a little deeper than the IN5s, and they maybe have like faster transient response, which I value in mastering. I will say one thing about the headphone idea. Like, first of all, like, yes, you could get a pair of Cali IN8s or even the IN5s. They're smaller. Both of those speakers are well under $1,000 for a pair. And then you have plenty of money left over, ideally, to treat your room. I would much rather have that than much more expensive speakers without the treatment, without going through that process you talk about of finding the right environment, the right spot in the room for room modes and room nodes, and finding the right listening level. I will say in super compromised rooms, or if you're traveling, the one thing that I can recommend that has worked for me is I have a pair of Odysseys. They don't pay me to say this, but I do have the Odyssey. These are the MM500s. If they gave me a pair of the LCD4s for free, I would use those. I didn't think I could do mastering work on headphones until I got these, because the planar magnetic drivers, they have the kind of, it's the most speaker-like experience I've had in headphones. They don't do any of that speaker emulating. It's not about like they're not giving you like crosstalk. They're not emulating some room. It's just the planar magnetic drivers can get down remarkably deep, remarkably flat. So these headphones can tell me useful information about 40 and 50 hertz that I would need to spend. You need to spend, I would say, at least $5,000 on acoustic treatment and speakers together to get as accurate low end as I can get out of these headphones. These are like $1,800, but they have a version of these that are like $400. And if you had $400 to spend on speakers and acoustic treatment, or $400 to spend on planar magnetic headphones like the Odysseys or maybe the new Avantone Planar 2s, I would probably go with $400 headphones over $400 of speakers and room treatment for getting accurate lows and a relatively neutral reference. You have to get used to mixing in headphones, and the presentation is different. Like, wide things sound even wider. You don't have the same kind of phantom center image that you have out of speakers, and you have to get used to that. But once you understand how headphones sound, I think you can get, for the first time, relatively neutral reference in headphones that could work for you. However, there's these complexities when it comes to headphones, the head relief transfer function, where we have differently shaped ears and the same headphones sound different to two different people. So you never get perfectly flat in headphones, but you can get remarkably better low frequency response out of headphones today cheaply than you could out of speakers. And that didn't used to be the case. This is really just in the past several years that I think this is possible due to advances in planar magnetic technology. But now I'm being a nerd and I'm talking more than Jeff, and I have to stop. So let's go on to more questions. So
can I mention one more thing too about expensive speakers? So the Cali Audio IN8s do not have as good of transient response as other speakers. They're not, they don't have a level of clarity as much as my expensive speakers used to have. And I actually like both of those things. I think they have like too much clarity is annoying and distracting. It's like when you watch, this is different from mastering or doing like repair work or trying to get out like, I don't know, pops and clicks, but if I'm trying to fall into the daydream of a song and I'm hearing in perfect detail every like errant mouth click or this and that, it's like I just can't fall. It's like too much information. Like one of my clients said it once. It's like it's almost like a collection of sounds as opposed to one thing, you know. So if you're working on speakers that have 1,000 times more transient response and detail and clarity than what everybody's listening to, even on $500. I really feel like the Kali IN8s and IN5s are they have plenty of detail, but not too much, right? Yeah. When something has too much detail, it's harder to like dig into it as much as you should, because all these.
All right, we're starting to lose Jeff right there. I'm sure he'll be back in just a second, but I totally know what he's saying. For me, I feel like I need slightly better speakers than my mixing clients that have more transient detail. But there is this possible issue with speakers that have too much transient detail where
I can't like I need to sometimes like boost those higher frequencies that kind of like add to the clarity a little bit more than what might feel right on very expensive speakers, because if you optimize it for like insane transient response and then you pull it up on your AirPod Maxes, it's just not, it's gonna lack clarity, you know what I mean? So
100%,
yeah, so I think the Kali, they fell into and this is one thing I've had to talk to Charles too. It's like, in my personal opinion, maximizing clarity is not necessarily the goal of a great mixing speaker. Now, if you want to listen to classical music and Steely Dan and all this for pleasure, then insane clarity might be what's great for you. But as a mixer that's doing all these different genres and stuff, if I try to set my clarity or whatever on my mixes and I go up on New Music Friday, it's like the person that dug into their HS8s that have no clarity or transient response with high end is like just as like more hype or whatever. So there's so many concerns. Then it's just like we don't necessarily like, I don't like watching Star Trek The Next Generation on like 60 frame rate, like 4K, you know what I mean? It's like not necessarily the best for the art. So there's a lot. You see their ugly makeup and stuff, and it's like, this is weird.
100%. Like when they remastered Star Wars for the first time, you could now see the boxes around the spaceships because like they got all the grime off of the film, and now you could see like how it was just like cut and pasted on top of the thing. Where some of like the the grime or lack of brightness or clarity made it so you couldn't see the hard edges. For me, I guess in mastering, I like to have monitors that are slightly nicer than my mixing clients, and I also am really sensitive to not wanting to introduce compression or limiting artifacts that are detracting. So one of the things that I like about having super fast transient response on the mastering side of things is I can hear attack and release times on dynamics processors better than I can on slower acting speakers. And it makes me more aware if I'm kind of doing something damaging, and it allows me to hear that. But that said, I think what you're saying, there's so much truth. I mean, this is why for ages, the most popular speakers have been somewhat mid-rangey, frowny-faced speakers to a degree that encourage people to add clarity and excitement and detail and scoop and bigness and immersion to their
so
mixers.
It's like a sliding scale, right? If the Kali's got too lack in transient response, too much detail, it's kind of a problem,
you might hype things
right?
up too much.
Too much, yeah. So it's like, for whatever reason, the level of clarity and transient response, everything on the IN series, right? That's the ones I use.
IN8,
just seems to be perfect for Jeff. You know what I mean? And the way that I like to do it. But I have the new secret, more detailed ones too that aren't out yet that I've really been enjoying well too, because with a little bit more transient response, you can hear maybe the tails of reverbs a little bit more, like certain things. So it's cool. It's always like trying to find an optimal setting, but I just want everybody at home to know, for like $600 or whatever they cost, you could be mixing top 40 music that goes platinum and whatever. So
totally. Just a couple more questions here. Rumen asks, thanks a lot. If it's okay, I also wanted to ask, we are planning on recording songs with friends, and it's going to be my first time recording other people's vocals. How should I approach it? Do you have thoughts on if you were recording other people, vocalists, for the first time, what should people know about recording vocalists that they don't think of until they've recorded a million vocalists?
Just don't do anything. Hopefully they're a good singer, and then make them comfortable. Right. So I don't, this is like, you've asked a question that is like one could spend a lifetime answering. But one thing so I used to be Frank Ocean's engineer. So one thing that I would do, and we recorded a lot of vocals, is I wanted to make sure that he could walk into the studio and everything would be perfect and he would never have to think about the engineering. Right. So what does that mean? It means the headphones were tested before he sat down, and the headphone mix was approximate to what I thought he would like before we started. So there wasn't this whole thing of like all the levels are checked as most as they could be, right? Don't start EQing and compressing the vocal recording when you might not even know the arrangement of the song yet. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people will have their vocal chain set up before they even know what the song is, right? And they've cut out all the low end from a vocal when it was going to be this ballad that could have really used that stuff. I feel like the amount of times that I've received a vocal and I was like, this compression really, this hardware analog compression that they put into the vocal recording was like so nice and amazing. God, they really nailed it. That's 0 times. The amount of times I've received a vocal where the compressor has ruined the emotion of the vocal to some capacity is almost 99% of the time. So it's hard as a young engineer. I don't even know if I'm answering this person's question right, because I don't know, this is like so context based.
Sure.
But like generally like young engineers at a nice studio are a lot of times the worst engineers on earth, because they feel this pressure to like do their things and like put the 1176 into the LA2A and use the Neve preamp and like roll off the lows and tuck the highs, and they're doing all this stuff. Meanwhile, like you just get to the end and all the emotion's gone. So I would do like nothing when I recorded vocals other than make the artist comfortable.
All right. Jacob Carroll has similar questions about tracking, but one question that stands out as being a new one here says, do you have any recommendations for mixing consoles that can interact with the DAW? You said you recently added a control surface and that it really improved things for you. What do you use? What would you recommend? And if that's too rich for people's blood, do you know of alternatives?
Yeah, so we talk about this in Mixerbrain. So I don't want people to think that. So my Avid S4 is like 80 grand or something, and I had a business loan to pay for that. That's like not realistic for almost everybody that hasn't made their like life. So basically, one of the things we do in the course is duplicate my exact setup at home for way cheaper, okay, to show people. And then I just work at the home. It's just as good at home, okay? Yep. So at home, I'm using Avid S1s into the Avid what is it called, the iPad controller thing. I show this all in the course how it's set up. And that's way cheaper. Like, I mean, it's a difference between, I don't know, you can scale it, right? But a couple grand.
And you can find those used too, the S1s that are like
probably
an iPad dock, and they're extremely inexpensive used too.
And one of the reasons why I talk about this in this course is like almost every control surface ends up just collecting dust or like dead skin cells is because like it's not so much that if you don't know why that you have the faders and what the optimal workflow is for mixing a song with the control surface, then it doesn't really ever connect, right? So what we really show in the course is how the split station setup works, how I do my trim automations, what my strategy is, how I fly through the sessions, all these things that make like the person goes through like, oh, wow, this is a much more creative way to mix. And now I know the workflow of that. It's not so much as that you just need faders. If you don't know the workflow with how to use the faders, like how I use my transport and all this stuff that goes into it, then it's just like the controller just gets like skin cells. So yeah, I use Avid S1 at home with a dock thing, and then my Avid S4 and my Studio East West. But that's what I would use. Yeah.
Cool. Piggybacking on our conversation about speakers, Jacob Carroll is saying, but why not focus on that clarity so that you can find those annoying spots and get rid of them? Isn't that like creating a neutral and accurate listening setup?
my point is that see, this is why everybody takes what people say in audio and they just go like, so by me saying like I don't want like insane amount of clarity doesn't mean that clarity isn't important. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm saying there's like an optimal zone, right?
And too many of us overdo it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you, again, it's like to fall into the daydream of a song. If you're hearing like this unnatural amount of transient response out of speakers, one, you're not hearing the song how anybody will ever hear it. And two, after years of working that way with the most expensive speakers on earth, it only caused problems and all of my clients hated it. And I would never dig into the mix as much as I otherwise would have if I was working on a playback system that was more like realistic to what the world will be, right? So part about being a good mixer is falling into the daydream of the record. But if I'm just hearing too much, I'm just like, what's going on? So it's, I get what they're saying, and I know what they're saying makes a lot of sense, but I'm just telling you, there's times in life, just trust me on this, there's a level of clarity that will only cause problems for you. And if you worked for the FBI and you had to like analyze like this weird thing and detail was like the only thing that mattered, but detail isn't the only thing that matters in playback. You do need a certain level of it. However, too much can be a problem.
I would just add to that if there are things, annoying spots that don't sound annoying on speakers that you know that get you good mixes, then maybe they're not things that are really annoying, and what's actually happening is your speakers are annoying you, and you're annoyed by the excessive brightness and detail of your speakers. So that's one of the things, like, you often find that there are a lot of also great classic recordings where you never notice until you put them on a $90,000 set of speakers that there is like a squeaky foot pedal on a kick drum or on a piano or something like that, and it doesn't matter. And the engineers who are mixing these on Ortones or whatever, slow transient speakers from the 70s, they're big box speakers that would have been slower transient, didn't hear those, and it didn't care, and it didn't matter, and it didn't stop anyone from enjoying the song. And now you could think of it when you listen on $90,000 speakers. Oh, these speakers are so cool. I can hear details that no one else will ever hear. And that's a fun thing about those speakers. But if you're chasing your own tail, trying to get rid of a pedal squeak on a piano, and that's distracting you from putting the emotion into the song that needs to be there, then maybe the speakers aren't serving you.
Okay, that is the best analogy. So back in the day, it might have just been a squeaky thing back when people were recording everything in nice studios. Nowadays, everything, even at the highest level, is recorded in bedrooms for the most part, or in like nice studios with bad engineers, right? So it's like pedal squeak times 1,000, and I can't do anything about that anyway, right? So if I'm hearing every little artifact of which between everybody's auto-tune and all their over-processing, this and that, you get to the point where it's just like I said before, if there's too much detail, you're trying to automate the song and do this thing, and you're like, God, that fucking squeaky thing, like, you know what I mean? Or I hear an ear click or whatever. So having something, again, let's not get crazy. You still need a lot of detail in your speakers, right?
I think we've hammered.
You just don't need.
I think we've hammered it home, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So one question here. This is a great one to end on because it allows me to turn this into a pitch. Because Jacob says, do I have to actually care about what different streaming platforms do to my exports, like YouTube compression, etc.? I think the biggest thing there that you need to know about those streaming platforms is, assuming you're listening at reasonably high quality, you're not listening to 96 kilobits per second stream, assuming you're listening to YouTube HD, 256 kilobits per second, or Spotify high quality, 320 kilobits per second, that sound pretty good, and you really can't tell the difference between those and the original format. The biggest thing there is the loudness and what it does to your mix. And I think Jeff has one of the best modules ever on that. It's called the Battlefield. And if you want the full answer to that, check it out because we're almost an hour and a half in. Go get Mixerbrain. Go do SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. That's SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain, and dive into the chapter called the Battlefield, because that is all about what the streaming platforms do to the exports. Particularly, the big thing there is loudness and whether it's going to make your stuff sound too quiet or too loud after volume normalization. Jeff does a great deep dive there. He goes through like almost a journey of exploration, I feel like, a discovery, because you came in with certain ideas. You talked to a mastering engineer friend of yours and came back with different ideas. And then you came back and tested some of those ideas in the studio. And people can go on that journey with you. It's a great section in there where you already come in knowing a lot, but you discover things and we discover new things along with you. So please check it out. SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain, 20% off right now with the code Worldwide 20. Just till the end of the month. So act now while time is, good and all that stuff.
True.
So that's my big pitch. And I got to tell you, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. Honestly, I could talk to you for another hour and a half and enjoy it, but I think we got to leave the people wanting more is one of the things you're supposed to do.
Leave them wanting more, yes.
Especially when you got a 24-hour course where they can hear you. If you've liked your time with Jeff, go spend 24 hours with Jeff. Hopefully not all at once in a giant binge watch where you don't remember anything, but like make it part of your day. Like your modules are so bite-sized. Instead of going on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, spend 15 minutes watching one of the modules in one of his chapters, get into a daily practice of that, watch one module a day, and over the course of a month, I mean, you'll come out knowing so much.
Yeah.
But also, you could also go through a whole chapter. Those are more like an hour or more, the chapters. Do that instead of doom scrolling. It's so good for you. I have taken so many courses in my life, both when it comes to audio, selling courses, running a website, jiu-jitsu, all of these things, and they have improved what I do, which is why I feel comfortable hawking my own courses and courses for a guy like Jeff, because I've seen the difference they've made in my own life. Like I took once a course on how to like make courses, and that course, it cost me some money, but I have made so much, so many times what it cost me just by taking that one course. And that's the kind of feedback I get on my courses. Like, Justin, I took Mixing Breakthroughs. It literally changed the way that I mix forever. That's amazing. I can't believe it. And I think Jeff's course could do it for you too. So check it out over at SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. Limited time discount code. Any final parting words from you, Jeff, before you leave the people?
Well, I didn't see the chat, so whoever showed up for this thing, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. In terms of Mixerbrain, check if you're a little, just look at the reviews. The reviews have been insanely positive. I know it's going to change your life. And again, you tell me at the end if it did or not. So yeah, buy Mixerbrain. Justin, thank you for letting me come on SonicScoop. Like you said, I've been involved with talking to you, or we did MixCon like 5 or 6 years ago when I was like just starting to figure out some of the Mixerbrain stuff, starting to like escape this like religion of audio that's messing up everybody's music.
Yes.
And now it's great to hear some of the stuff that you were mentioning about your courses are like right in line with what I've been teaching. And if people buy enough Mixerbrains, I'll buy an expensive katana and then get into sword fighting or something like that.
We should do it, man. If you're ever in New Hampshire, maybe every time I'm in California, I tell you, I try to get Jeff to roll with me. He has so far not done it, probably because you don't want a guy in a lighter weight class who's a lower belt kicking your ass. No, he'd probably destroy me. But
no, I definitely
one of
will.
These days,
you tried to get me to roll with you in New York when I was hungover at AES or something like that. That's I think more of an accurate story.
Yes, one of my big things when I'm in New York, I try to limit my evening drinking by going to jiu-jitsu first thing in the morning, because otherwise I know I'm going to get pulled to like a million parties. And if I tell everyone, I have to go to jiu-jitsu at 7:30 a.m., then I can say no to all the parties, because otherwise, I would partake in them. Dude, Jeff, so good to have you here. And I also have some non-sharp training swords we could also mess around with the next time we see each other in person one of these days.
That might be safer.
Yes. I honestly, these katanas that we have, if you hit someone with these, I was telling my daughter, she was really excited. I got a new katana in the mail. I have a bunch of, safe swords, and this one is not safe. And I said, Sophia, sweetheart, you're never allowed to touch Daddy's katana, because if you hit someone with this, they would die. She's like, oh, okay. So yeah.
I mean, that is that is the objective of a katana.
Yeah, that's what they're made for. That and fun when they're dull. Yeah. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for being here, and
thank you.
Sayonara. Thank you guys for hanging out. It's been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Big shout out and thanks to Soundtoys. Check their stuff out, soundtoys.com. Check out our courses, Mixing Breakthroughs, etc. But the big thing right now is SonicScoop.com/Mixerbrain. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you love it. And if you do try it, let us know in the comments what you thought of it. Thanks again for hanging out. See you next time.